Backstory: back in 2019, when I shifted to my new house, me and my mother were going to a friend's home in our building. An hour later, while my mother was talking to her friend, she asked if there were any home tuitions in the building. My mom's friend answered with a yes and pointed to another flat in the same floor. We rang the doorbell to introduce ourselves, as my mother's friends were good friends with the people. Also, at first the people were kind. Turned south. Quickly. Entitled mother, entitled kid, mother. It went a little like this. Rings doorbell. Good evening, how can I help you? Good evening, I heard you take tuition classes? Yes, I do. I'm actually looking to send my son to tuition, and I heard from that you take tuitions. Oh. Very well, please come in. We enter inside. Me, it's a PS4 Pro. Yours might be different. So I go to the washroom and come out, and the first thing I saw was him stealing my Assassin's Creed disc. Me, whoa, chill there dude, what are you doing? Eek, I'm just looking. Me, I just saw you taking my disc and putting into your bag. Eek, I was just looking. Tards to get all teary. Me, having the ah shit face. Why are you crying, man? At this point the eek was running to his mom, and I just stayed there thinking nothing much of it. Why are you trying to steal my kid's bag? In angry tone. Me, but I didn't. Eek, he tried to steal my bag and didn't even let me play in his PS4. Eek, let's go to your home. Why? Eek, I wanna see your tiny poor home. Sure. Goes to my flat. Eek, woo oh, this is so tiny compared to mine. Yeah. At least it's a place where I can call home and comfortably live in it. Yeah, not paying attention. Sees my PS4. Whoa, you have a PS4 too? What's your ID? Me, I don't wanna share it. Eek, please starts begging. I want to see your Fortnite level. I quit playing that long ago. And can you please stop leaning into my PS4 and the discs? Eek, chill, I was just looking. What type of PS4 anyway? It doesn't look like mine. Me, it's a PS4 Pro. Yours might be different. So I go to the washroom and come out, and the first thing I saw was him stealing my Assassin's Creed disc. Me, whoa, chill there dude, what are you doing? Eek, I'm just looking. Me, I just saw you taking my disc and putting into your bag. Eek, I was just looking. Tards to get all teary. Me, having the ah shit face. Why are you crying, man? At this point the eek was running to his mom, and I just stayed there thinking nothing much of it. Why are you trying to steal my kid's bag? In angry tone. Me, but I didn't. Eek, he tried to steal my bag and didn't even let me play in his PS4. Me, what? I think it's the opposite. In a calm tone. No. My son will never lie, he told me. Me, sighs, look, for all I care and know, I never tried to steal his bag, and nor did the whole me not letting him play on my console ever happen. You can please leave this room. And I'm not interested in your tuitions. Has a bright red face and walks away. I'll begin by saying that I come from a very well-known West African country, and I come from one of the 3 major ethnic groups in my country. My country has a lot of oil, and my father is an engineer and worked for a very big oil company here before he retired a few years ago. He's the second of 3 children. Due to his job, salary and position within the company, he became the entire family's breadwinner. His elder brother had 7 children with his wife, and his younger brother had 2 children with his late wife, and my father trained each and every one of them. He sent them all to school through their nursery to primary and secondary schools, and when they all graduated from high school, he gave each of them the option of either going to a higher institution or helping them start up a business of their own. Every Christmas, We'd travel to the village and he'd buy multiple 50-kilogram bags of rice, bags of beans, tons of groceries, specially dried fishes, and so much more, and he'd distribute this to the entire family, aunts, uncles, etc. He catered for his siblings, cousins, old friends in the village, as well as their respective families so much, and it sometimes offended my mother, because while he took excellent care of us and she was never against him helping his siblings out, she felt he was making them overly dependent on him. He opened a thriving business for his elder brother's wife and stocked up her business with all the necessary wares, and he did the same for his younger brother, and yet whenever they had a problem, they'd choose to call him instead of solving even the most basic problems by themselves. This is all preamble to show you that he really cared for his family. There are a few cases of prime entitlement I'd like to point out. Case 1. This involves my father's elder brother's wife we'd call Rita and her eldest son we'd call Chris. Rita is a woman in her 50s and Chris is in his mid-30s. When Chris was born, his mother despised him because given our tradition and culture, she felt like his pregnancy forced her into a marriage she did not want, so she took out her frustration on him. When he was 11, my mother was a newlywed and on one of her trips accompanying my dad to the village, she saw how Rita physically abused her own son, and out of fear for his safety, my parents asked his father to let them take Chris with them back to the city so they could in a sense foster him as their own to remove him from that abusive environment. I was barely a year old at this point. Chris lived with us for roughly 18 years. He got a good education, and when it was time to go to the university, he had a lot of problems gaining an admission. In my country, all the universities, both state and federal, are under an organization, and everyone takes an annual national exam based on your intended course of study, and those who do the best are admitted into their institution of choice. He'd taken this exam for about 6 years and each time he'd fallen short and hadn't received an admission, so my dad gave him the option to continue trying or to put it on hold and learn a good trade for about a year, and after that, he'd open a business for him and maybe he could try getting into the university later on if he still wanted. He chose the latter option, and he was sent off to another city to stay with a family friend who taught him all he needed to know about the given business for free, and after a year, he returned back home. My father gave him what is equivalent to $12,000 to begin a business. Over here, $12,000 is a very big chunk of money, especially with the low cost of living here compared to our Western counterparts, and also especially how lax our tax laws are here. My dad offered him a check for that amount, and he refused it, saying how small the money was. My dad had already found a really good space for him to run his business and had paid and rented it out for 2 years for him, as well as paying his water and electric bills. The $12,000 was an initial capital for him to stock up on his wares without having to worry about rent or any critical expenses for 2 years at least. All he had to do was simply make sales and bring in profit so that after 2 years, he could afford to take on the expenses on his own, because he probably would have saved quite a bit of money in that time, and even if he did have difficulties, knowing my dad, he would have jumped in to help. However, Chris rejected the money, saying how small it was and he was expecting at least $17,000. That although the space my dad had rented for him was in a prime location, that it was too small for him and that he had found a much bigger space a few blocks away, and he expected my dad to pay for that as well. He said he had big ideas and didn't want my dad to repress his ideas, so he needed the appropriate support. My mother just about lost her head hearing this and chastised him about how ungrateful he was being. She asked him how many people were willing to do the things my dad had done for him. She asked him why he couldn't use this fund as an initial capital and begin his business and strive to make it successful so that he could afford to move into that bigger space after the 2 years lease was up. He got upset and called his mother, with whom relations had improved significantly over the years. Fast forward 2 years and this was now 2016. I was 18, 19 and my immediate younger sister was now in secondary school and my other siblings were also in primary school, so the financial burden on my dad was quite a lot during this time, so he called Chris and had a talk with him. This was sometime in October and my dad said that since Chris's business was going well that perhaps it was time for him to move out from our home maybe by the new year, so that the financial constraints could be alleviated a bit. Now mind you, Chris had lived with us for 18 years, since I was barely a year old and he was 11, 12 years old, and now I was 18, 19 years old, so he was about 29, 30 years old now. He never paid rent for one day or paid for utilities. My dad always did. He never bought his own food or groceries either. My dad did that too for almost 2 decades he lived with us. When my dad asked him to move out, he said nothing and like before, called his mother. I have no idea what was said but she. Fast forward 2 years and this was now 2016. I was 18, 19 and my immediate younger sister was now in secondary school and my other siblings were also in primary school, so the financial burden on my dad was quite a lot during this time, so he called Chris and had a talk with him. This was sometime in October and my dad said that since Chris's business was going well that perhaps it was time for him to move out from our home maybe by the new year, so that the financial constraints could be alleviated a bit. Now mind you, Chris had lived with us for 18 years, since I was barely a year old and he was 11, 12 years old, and now I was 18, 19 years old, so he was about 29, 30 years old now. He never paid rent for one day or paid for utilities. My dad always did. He never bought his own food or groceries either. My dad did that too for almost 2 decades he lived with us. When my dad asked him to move out, he said nothing and like before, called his mother. I have no idea what was said but she called my dad in a fury that evening, screaming her head off about how my dad has never really cared about her son's success and brought up the $12K incident from a few years earlier. She said something along the lines of, "You want him to leave your house while your wife's sister is still living with you. This is how little you care about your brother and his family. My son doesn't need you or your charity. My God will help him to survive with or without you," and so on. The wife's sister she referred to was a young niece of my mom's who had lost her parents to militant actions in one of our cities and she was barely 15 at that time. After that call, he packed his things and was gone in a few weeks. This was 2016, and I haven't seen or heard from him since then. They view my dad as a bad person for not giving him the amount of money he wanted and for asking him, a 30-year-old man with a thriving business, to move out.